Good evening on a hot day. 28 degrees here at the moment still, and it's what, 7 o'clock or something. Here I've got Richard's made in Mexico Fender Strat, and already off camera, because it's so hot, I just been kind of preparing a few things. So I've got I've changed the nut out for a custom adjustable one, and I've changed the string tree as well. But this guitar is a nice Mexican Fender Strat, and it's interesting because I've had a load of Strats just recently. So I've had kind of American, USA Strats. I've had Mexican Strats as well, and you can tell the difference. I mean, there is a difference. So this one is a bit all wrong from the start. So the frets are, well, first of all, first thing I noticed about it is that it's the action, the saddles have to be right down low to get anywhere near to the right action here. So this could use a small shim. The nut wasn't great, wasn't staying in tune very well. The neck could do with a shim, and the frets appear to be fairly heavily flattened, and there's loads of fret slap. So I'm kind of nervous about those, whether there's that much room in them for making big adjustments. Well, we shall see. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of zoom. Let me zoom out. Sorry about this. I'll find the zoom out bit. Where's it gone? Yeah, wide angle. I've been caught out so many times with this damn thing not recording. So let's just tune it up for a minute. So I've taken some time to get the nut right. So yeah, it's going to have, it has got 8s on it, or it might have, is it 8s? No, it might be, it's going to have 8s on it, it might be 9s currently. So just looking at where things are to begin with, let's see what we've got in the way of relief. A bit too much relief, I would say, and I managed to get, it's about 1.75, and over here it's about 1.6. There's not a lot of room. Now we can, I mean, technically, right, there is probably maybe just enough room to get it down, but it would be with the saddles all on the deck. That feels a bit extreme, so that's why I would like to shim it slightly. I'm also going to have a look, because I bought a load of short screws for this kind of thing. There's nothing worse than having grub screws sticking up and out of the saddles. So if you're in a situation where you don't need all of that extra height, you can put in shorter versions, but you have to remember to buy them, which I did. So before I do any setup work, this made in Mexico has got a great big solid bridge block, which is unusual. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just pull in the tremolo claw. And I believe that Richard wants this in down only mode, but we'll start by just getting it flat against the top, so it's not, we don't want it pulling up. Now what I can see straight away, I think these are too tight down, so it's pulling the front of the tremolo plate down. So just going to take these off a little bit, which makes it a little bit difficult working around the strings. But what I want is I just want to allow the plate to sit back and let the strings pull it flat, because it feels like at the moment it's just being held nose down by these screws pulling a little bit too much. That's better. Flat on the deck. Good. That's a common mistake that people make, is over tightening these screws at the front and then they push down on the little chamfered edge. So let's have a think. Let me find, first of all, see if I can find the grub screws that I want to use. Little shorties. I think these will be them. Let's find the right hex key. No, hex spanner. So these are UK sized ones, so I don't know where they've come from. I'm not sure if the Mexican ones are always. Are they imperial or metric? I thought they were imperial. Let's have a look at these. These are nice and stumpy. So these are only a couple of quid a set, but it gives us a chance to bring these down. So the way I'm looking at this is, if possible, I'd like to not use a shim, just as a matter of principle. So if I can get this set at the height it needs to be without shimming it, and there is, bearing in mind, there is a kind of minimum height that it will go down to, when it's actually flat on the deck, which it actually is now. Let's just check if we can get away with that. That's not too bad. Yeah, we can do that. So we'll maybe avoid the shim. But it's what you wouldn't want is to have these saddles on the deck and these great big grub screws sticking miles out the top, because that would just be a really uncomfortable, tall, wobbly looking affair. Okay, I'm going to go with these. That's a neat way of getting around the problem. So we'll take all of these out. I don't think we'll need any longer ones. We shall see. Right, so yeah, where's the difference in this Mexican Strat versus the Craig's USA Ultra, for example? Well, what I noticed is before I worked on the Ultra, in its default state, the fretwork was actually pretty good. Now that meant that I was able to sort of set fairly low action, and the only thing wrong at the low action was that it had a bit of fret slap, but there was no choking on the frets, and there was no individual high notes, high frets. So for the money, what you got was a fair bit of fretwork done. I'm not really sure of the method or the process they used, so I can't really say. But some fretwork had clearly been done to make it, to get it to that condition, which was pretty good. I had to still do some work to remove the fret slap, which is quite a common kind of situation in many guitars. Now, what I don't know with this one is quite how far we've got to go through here. Yeah. It might ideally want slightly taller ones, but I don't think. Look at me! I might even I may have bought some different lengths. Don't tell me they're all the same. How did I manage to get the exact same ones? Thinking I was getting different heights. Oh, these appear to be exactly the same. That's the problem. We might find ourselves in between. In other words, these little short ones may be a fraction too short if I don't have any alternatives. then it still might suggest a shim, but we don't know. Let's see where we can get to. If it gets here with these shorties, then let's leave it the way it is. Right, so these two middle ones are going to be the tallest, the highest set of the whole lot. So if they kind of happily live there, then we shouldn't be in too bad a place. The question is that still attached? So I'm just going to quickly check again. Fraction over 1, just about 1, oh, 1.5, 1.5, right. So the middle ones are at their sort of maximum height, so I think we probably get away with that. And again, it's quite nice that you don't have any screws sticking out, so I think I'd rather just swap these out than shim the neck. But it really doesn't want these huge, great long 10mm long screws. Mine are probably a tad too short. They're about 5 mils, but they'll do. So I'm going to do an adjustment on the relief because it's a little bit excessive at the moment, and then we'll aim to set the ideal action, and then we'll get into the fret leveling part. Once I've set the ideal action, I'm going to test playing notes and see how they play and get a sense of what we're up against. I did the other day, and I seem to think it was some very definite uneven frets, some choke outs here, plus some quite a lot of fret slap. Okay, so there's my variety of shorty screws. I probably ought to just put these all in together since they all appear to be the same size. Right. When you think about it, these people who sell things on don't make a lot of money. I think people charge, I've seen those sets of short screws like that going for, I don't know, people selling them for like £6 for 12 screws. You know, I mean, wow. You know, you get them cheaper than that in bulk. But wow. There is no nut left over, by the way, because that broke during the, well, it had to be sawn out, so that's gone. Right, let me get the basic action right here first, and then we can look at the other bits. So we've got just under 1 there, which we don't want. We want about 1.2, that's good. A bit low here. Boring, fiddly stuff. Okay. Now, this will be basically decided by whether or not I can get the right action here. Fraction over 1.5, but that's not bad. Alright, let's get it in tune. Okay, so I've got no bits sticking up there, which I like. Right, what do we need for the hex key on this one? I'm never quite sure about this. Is it 4mm? Is it the imperial size, or is it a larger? It's a larger one, my dear boys and girls. So it's not the US Fender, it's a bigger one. I'll have to go away and look for it. Not there, not there. Maybe this, maybe that. Never quite figured out. I had this one lined up as a Mexico Strat one, but I can't. That's not going to get in there. This is the 4mm one, but surely that won't be it. No, that won't be it. Okay, I'm going to have to go on a little hunt for the correct hex key. Okay, there it is. Okay, so that was, we had a little bit too much relief, so let's put some loading on here. I can find the bite point. Sorry. Okay, so we'll get it to bite point, and we'll put a little bit of, I can get it bite again, a little bit of turn on it. There we are. Sometimes you just can't seem to reach it. There you go. So now let's put it under load. Let's see if that's too much. No, it's flattened out though. Okay. So you can see we've got the first fret action is a little bit low for a minute, but it's playing, so we'll dial a little bit up on there with our special key, a little bit at either end. Okay, that. Tune it again. Okay, so we're all set at the right sort of action. We know we've got a little bit of fret slap, and we've got some not so much individual fret buzz, a couple of patches. Okay, not too bad, not as bad as I thought from the first play. So what we've got to do now is get it ready for the leveling bit. Now the leveling bit is difficult, so I'm starting to boil again. Leveling bit's difficult in that we've got a few different things to achieve here. First of all, we've got some fret wear up here, which is quite deep in places, so that's one thing. But the frets feel quite low already, so I don't feel inclined to be trading off lots of fret metal, just in inverted commas, just for cosmetic fret wear. it's a nice to have, you know, if we can get rid of it, but it's not strictly a good trade. You know, particularly if your frets are, it's never a good trade, but especially if your frets are starting out reasonably low. So we've got a bit of fret wear in terms of grooves. We've also got some fret slap and some choke out, which we can aim to cure. And the frets have been leveled before by the looks of it, so none of that's too bad, and I'm hoping we can clear up the fret slap that makes this noisy and rattly on the low strings. So that's what I'm hoping, without taking too much metal. But you know, it's already fairly low, so I want to be as controlled and careful as possible. My other concern about this guitar will be the finish on the fingerboard. These blonde Fenders have a nasty habit of losing their finish, and in this one, if this one loses its finish while I'm trying to do the frets, then it's easy enough to refinish it, but it's difficult because it will really ideally need refretting, because it doesn't make any sense trying to refinish around those frets since they're already pretty worn anyway. So kind of tricky position to be in. Having said that, it's already quite worn in the terms of the frets, so it wouldn't be the end of the world to be forced to have a refret, but it's more money naturally. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to level this with my ears and eyes concentrating on a couple of things. So the first thing, my least important thing in this is going to be getting rid of the wear grooves. Okay, so I'm not even going to focus on those. I'm going to focus almost entirely on, first of all, freeing up the chokes up here. That's something I want to do, because I want this to play and you want to be able to bend the strings at this playing action. So to free up those bends, we've got to just keep in mind that the choking is happening really over in the G track as the E string comes up the hill. So we've got to be ready to, be conscious that that's where the high fret is getting in the way. So in this first area, the E track, really what I'm doing is I'm leveling with this beam, and I'm looking to see what it's going to tell me about the state of the neck. So I'm not really pressing with too much in the way of force or anything. I'm just mostly gravity, and so I'm going to just run it up and down a little bit and then stop. And so straight away it gives me an interesting view, and I don't know whether this is very easy to see from here, but if you can see, barely touching that one, not touching, cutting, cutting more, cutting more, cutting more, cutting more, cutting most, cutting, not cutting, or barely, not, barely, some, very little. So what we've got is we've got a low spot here, and we've got a low spot here, about that big, and then these are higher. So that's the first thing I can tell you about this neck as told to me by the fret leveling beam, and it's really good for that, because it has an ability to diagnose what's going on. So why is it doing that? Are there a series of frets that have been hammered in lower? Well, no. What's happened is, what I'm pretty certain has happened, I'm going to have to drink this Coke while I'm dying of thirst. Sorry about this. While it's vaguely cool. Yeah, so why are there low patches? It's because the neck isn't even. It's because it's undulating, and this beam is relatively curved compared to the neck. underlying it. So that tells us we've got kind of little ups and downs, and the only real way we're going to solve those ups and downs is to level them out. But we're conscious that we want to use this tool to very gently try and take off the peaks, I guess, of the high spots, and gently balance out. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to get all the way down. So there's a low spot right here, and there's a low one here. Now the question is when do we stop trying to bottom it out? And really the issue is, how does it sound at this point? Now I expect these to sound a little bit dead. You know why? Because you can see they're in the ditch, they're in the trough, and that makes the following ones relatively high. So up until those two, which is kind of indicated to us already, I could predict that, because this pattern of cutting tells me that there's a low spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the same beam, same calibration, but I'm going to gently push down a little bit at this end to try and just, I suppose you could say, just dig those out of that low spot. And they're still low, so I'm not going to get there. I'm just conscious of, I don't want to take too much material. This is very fine, it's 400 grit anyway. Now the fact that this is in a ditch here, or a little relative dip, means it's probably got something to do with why it's choking out on bends as well. So we have to kind of accommodate that. So I'm going to keep the same calibration for the moment and go across into the B track. I'm going to follow this with the same calibrated shape. Now I can see, you'll be able to see on the frets where the string wear is, because it tends to, the marker pen tends to go into the grooves, gets into the grooves, and it stays there even when you're leveling. These have been leveled before. This is quite flat. This isn't me cutting it. There's a little bit of cutting, but it's not enough. It's revealing the original flat spots, which we can re-crown hopefully, but again they're quite low, so we won't get a very massively good re-crowning out of it. We'll do our best. So a bit of leveling. Again, slightly dead here because we're in that ditch still. I'm going to leave that there for now. I'm going to recalibrate as we move to the all critical G track, and this is the one that's going to free up the chokes, if we're going to free them up at all, and that's the important bit, the bends that are choking. So let me make sure we've got this calibrated right. It is. So now I'm going to push the strings out of the way, and this is the critical G track. So again, I'm going to leave it to mostly its own weight to begin with, just sort of let it tell me what's going on. And it is revealing the high frets that have already been leveled quite excessively. Now again, we're reading a low one there, high ones here which are cutting up or have been cut quite a bit, a low one there. Now this is quite interesting because it's still low here, which is the sort of dip that I predicted anyway, or that we knew was coming. So what I'm interested in now is, first of all, do the individual notes play? Yes, but with a little bit of fizzle. And then we want, see now, we expect it to choke out because we're in the dip now, bending uphill. Now that's the problem. We need, if we're going to dig out those chokes or those notes, if we want to get them to play, we're going to have to concentrate on this end of the G track to, if you like, bottom out the frets after the low spot, and that's all you really can do because of the low spot. The low spot creates the problem, and as I said, it's not to do with, it's not the result of frets being hammered in too hard or anything like that. It's to do with a bump in the neck, which you can't do anything about. It's there due to the, you know, the vagaries of wood. Well, that's cleaned up the slap part of the deal. Nice little tiny bit down there. In fact, just for that, I will put this back in and just concentrate for a second on that patch down there on the 5th fret. Okay, so when I say concentrate, I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure on there as I look at it in a funny way, and I'm hoping that by doing that I'm going to just ease out the fret slap on that point. Yeah. Just about. Yeah. So that's freed up the choked off notes. Brilliant. So again, I'm not going to worry about trying to check whether I've got rid of all the fret wear down here. I'm concentrating on the playability first. This business with the wear grooves, that's really mostly cosmetic. It has to be extreme before it gets in the way of playability, really. It's not even as if the strings or the frets get notched. If they get notched like on a 0 fret, then that becomes a clicking little groove and it's horrible, catches the strings. But in the case of general cowboy chords fret wear, as they call it, really what all you're getting there is a sort of soft groove, from perpetual sort of contact side to side. So it's usually not that hard to play. These have been leveled really hard before, but what this is showing is that this way of doing it, putting it under compression, it didn't level that enough. You can see where it's doing the work. A little bit of fret slap. So from about 9 upwards, so again I'll pull the string out of the way and we'll concentrate on 9 upwards. So I'm trying to, more than anything at this stage, I'm looking to clear up what I call the fret slap, and that's where the frets the strings don't have quite enough room to move without clipping the frets. Good. Happy? It looks messy, but then it always does on maple. Yeah, so this method of the way they've sprayed these necks is a way that I don't like to do personally. They've put the frets in on the bare wood and then they've sprayed the finish on top, and the reason I can tell that is because the finish comes up and over every fret, and although they sand off the finish off the top of the fret while they're doing the fret work of whether they level it or round off the frets or polish them or whatever they do, they remove the finish that's on top, but you can still see the light glinting off the carpet of finish as it goes up the side of the fret, and it makes a very distinctive reflective pattern that I can tell every time I see it. So now at this point I'm looking to I'm listening for the fret slap on the A. A little bit there, a little bit there in the dip. So only at the top there in the dip, which is good. So I'm going to put again a little bit of focus in on there with this end of the rod, right in that little bit. So again, there's no two ways around it. If you're gonna even out or eke out that little bit of fret slap, and we do have to hit on these surrounding frets a little bit to bottom it out. Otherwise, you're just still going to get, that little dip in the, not in the frets, a dip in the wood is going to cause the buzz all the time. Little tiny bit. Try a little bit more here. It's the dip, it's the hole that's causing it. So we're trying to move down the frets on either side. That's the price you've got to pay. What are we paying it for? We're paying it for the natural unevenness of the neck, the bumpiness of the neck. It's just the nature of wood under compression. It can't maintain a perfect curve, unfortunately. Just how it is. Okay, I'm going to stop there. If it doesn't play, I'm not going to chase it any further. Tiny bit, just a tiny bit, but that's the way it's going to go. When I get to a judgment call where I know I've gone as far as I can go, what I then do is, if necessary, I will raise the action very slightly to tidy up any last bits of fret slap. So see, it's a mucky process when you take off fret metal. As I say, this is 400 grit, so it's not moving an awful lot in any one go, but it feels quite extreme because of the amount of dust it makes. But that's a mixture of, the substrate coming off the stuff coming off the paper. Good. I'm happy. So you can see what it took. That's what it took to get the bends fixed. And you can see that we had a low section, a highish section, a low section, and a high section. So it's 4 distinct areas that you can't do anything about. You can't bend the neck or shave it or do anything to it. You're stuck. You're stuck. You've got to work with it. But that's how I chase around and even it out across the different areas to get as good as we can get the best playability out of what is an imperfect neck. So now when I get this recrowned and everything polished out, cleaned up, we'll have a neck that now, or a fretboard that is now tailored to what we know this neck will do. We know how it bends now, and that's what the banana fret leveling method is great for. It knows, it can reveal to you what's going on in the topography of the actual neck. Now, as I said before, my concern about these Mexican maple jobbies is I've had quite a few of them, well, not quite a few, I've had enough of them in the past where the minute the masking tape comes into contact with the finish, it lifts it off, and there's nothing you can do about it if it's going to do it. It's caused by an adhesion problem, and I haven't seen it enough to be able to confidently say which range of guitars it affects and which it doesn't. But every time I see an American or a Mexican Strat with a maple board, I get sweaty and worried. So I'm prepared for it to happen. Now you might say, well, if you're worried about it, is there an alternative? Well, the problem with this is that there aren't really that many sensible ways to polish out these frets without using paper, masking tape and lots of grades of sandpaper. You could try and not mask off the fretboard and try and just use a fret protector, but you can't really do the same range of the word I'm looking for, papers, grits and so on. I'm just looking at this. This is it's mucky. So what I want to do is I just want to first of all brush off, I'll do it out of sight, brush off the leftovers, grime to begin with. Just sort of get rid of some of it. It gets everywhere and I end up obviously having to wipe down the whole guitar. But we start off by brushing it off. Now the next part of the equation here is I'm going to want to recrown these frets. Now that means to take the flat spots that I've just put on them and reshape those into more arch shaped. So get rid of the edges of the flat spots and bring them inwards using a special file. Now that file, if the frets are low to begin with, that file is going to contact the finish. It's very difficult to find a shallow enough file. So there's a sort of there's a couple of these you can buy, but they really only deal with different grits. So what I'm going to try and they're concave files, and they're designed so that the idea is that you use this to reshape the fret like this. Now the problem is, the lower the fret is, the more likely that the edges of this file are going to come into contact with the finish, and it feels to me that that could be what's happening here. I'm going to put this down a little bit, so let's see if we can give you a civilized view. Hey, zoom in, man. That's a bit too big. Yeah. I must remember when I move on from these first few to remove. So I'm on the medium gauge fret size, and I'm feeling the way this is cutting, and it's doing it, but I can feel the edges of the file are riding on the upskirts of the finish, which is okay. It's not destroying it, it's not cracking it or anything. That's what I'm watching out for. I don't want to give this stuff any excuse to fall off, but because the metal is pretty worn, there isn't a lot of height to keep the edges of this file away from that little carpet of shiny finish. But I think we should be able to do it. So if I walk along here. So as I say, this is a combination of what I've just leveled and the work that's already been done sometime in the past to level, which has already put some fairly flat spots on. You can tell that through experience, because you suddenly find yourself, where is the thing there? You suddenly find yourself, you do a pass with the fret leveling file and you suddenly see a great big shiny flat spot like you've been leveling for hours, and of course you can't have taken that much off, or you know you haven't, because you know how it cuts with experience. So it's a good indicator that it's already been leveled to that level of flatness. So this is okay. This is getting there without scraping too hard on the finish. Mercifully, now I am going to use masking tape, and I'm going to take the risk. What I'll do is I've found in the past that the greatest likelihood of damage is when the masking tape goes around the side, and it can often be the back of these necks that seem to fall apart quicker, less so than the front. The front seems to hang on. So just to give myself the best chance I can get, I will use masking tape, but I will either crop it at the edges so it doesn't wrap around the side, and hopefully it will stay on well enough to get the job done. But it will be a nerve-wracking thing until I kind of finish all the sanding out, and we remove the paper. Okay. Right. This is sort of going okay. I mean, you can see I'm done to do a fair bit of work here to take off these flat spots on these frets, but I'm getting there. In the end, it's not the end of the world. But from my perspective, there always comes a time where you sort of think, okay, I'm charging the customer for the whole setup, including the tusk nut and the strings. It's £125. Unfortunately, that really does need to go up soon, because the price of all my parts and everything I use has gone up so much, courtesy of pandemic and Brexit together. But anyway, so I know what I'm charging the customer for this process here, and there comes a point at which I don't feel comfortable charging that when the frets are so low that I'm giving back a guitar that has nicely leveled and recrowned frets and so on, but is really towards the end of its playing life because of the lack of fret metal. So at some point I have to kind of call out that this doesn't make sense. Either don't do it and just keep playing it, or if you're going to do it, invest the extra £125 and have a full refret as well as the full setup afterwards, which I currently charge £250 for. At least that way, I know that I'm giving a guitar back with brand new frets. It also, it also allows me to fix any other issues. So, for example, if the finish was giving away, I can strip it back, refret and refinish. And if I was going to refinish and refret, then there's also an option there to make sure this neck is level, and if it needs be, radius it level, so that we don't have this trough valley problem that we've got. So these couple up here, hardly any leveling because they're in the ditch and they haven't been really touched at all by the leveling process. Whoop. It's skimmed over the top of them, really. And some more harder work here because it's been hit harder. Right, so once I've done this, what I can see already from down the other end, I can tell that there are still some fret wear marks which I am not going to do any more work to. I'm going to leave them as is, because I think there's enough, high enough cost in fret metal to get this playing as good as it can play. I don't want to cost it any more by just going after a cosmetic treatment, really. One more fret now, the final one. Okay, I think that's as good as it's going to be. Right, so dust off, brush off the dust off. While this is out, let's go out to a zoom out. Can we? No, the other way. Sorry. Somebody said, maybe you should get a what's that thing called? GoPro. And the thing is, I've already run. I do have an action cam set up for the overhead shots, the cutaways, and of course I've also used that on its own at times. And the problem with the action cam type thing is that ultimately it gives a very rounded picture, which people can get a little fed up with. So it's really you've got to compromise really somewhere down the way. So I like the iPhone because of its quality of close-ups, for example, when the time is right, like this. gratuitously good looking close-ups on the iPhone. So there's my frets recrowned. You see that? I've left as thin a line of black. You can see the carpeted effect going up the side of the fret. It actually looks like it's going inwards or downwards, but it's actually going up the side, hence those shiny kind of indentations along the side of the frets. It's always a little giveaway, that. Anyway, yeah, so yeah, I stick with the old iPhone, I think, and any overhead cutaway shots courtesy of the Sony action camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe off some of the marker pen just now off this board. Now it's going to get dirty again when I polish out. Well, there's going to be a lot of dust flying around when I polish out, but I like to get rid of as much of the pen as I can first, so it's not hanging around later. So what I'll do next is mask off the fingerboard as lightly as I can to allow me to get the job done, but as little adhesion as possible for the minimum risk of pulling off the finish, which we definitely don't want. Okay, so I'm just getting rid of some dust and stuff around here, and I'm at it. Again, we'll do a clean up at the end as well, just to make sure. Before I go off camera to do the masking off, I know that both Martin and Richard, I think, were keen to have a quick look under here. So if I get me the right screwdriver, we can have a look. I'm not expecting any surprises, but it shall not hurt. So once I've had a look under here, then I'll go off camera, do the masking out, do the masking tape, do the fret sanding and polishing, and come back when it's time to fit some new strings. So one of the things that I did today off camera was the nut, and that often takes about an hour to get exactly right. So it's a long process, but it's worth doing and getting right, because it makes such a huge difference to the playability, but there's no quick way of doing it. Okay, so we just have a quick look. It's all looks pretty standard to me. 250k pots, ceramic pickups, ceramic magnet pickups, I should say. Yeah, a little grounding screw. Mexico, what do they call those things? The sort of the CNC machine marks, locator holes. I always never knew what they were when I first started doing this, and somebody said that they're what the CNC uses to locate and know where it is on the body, and obviously as long as it's underneath the scratch plate and stuff, it doesn't matter. If, it doesn't matter what it looks like, it's hidden. So yep, no surprises under there. I mean, some would argue that's a fairly so-so quality, lowish quality pickup, but I mean, who knows? I think people can get very sort of snotty and think that only Alnico 5 pickups are any good. And lots of great guitars have had ceramic pickups since time immemorial, whatever they say. So I think if they sound good, then there's nothing wrong with them. So we'll just put this back together, and we'll be onwards. So I'm going to set this with a down only tremolo at the end, which is a simple process. It's just a matter of setting the strength of the springs to a point where at rest they hold the plate of the tremolo plate flat to the deck, but doesn't take much effort of the arm to push them forward to get the shimmer. So that shouldn't be difficult. Okay, there we are. All in order in the electrics department, so it seems. Okay, I'm going to go off camera, come back in a short while, and see you in a minute. Okay, dokie. Zoom out for a minute. Zooming outing. It's still boiling in here, and I've worked up quite a sweat just getting the frets polished out and cleaned up. So now I'm going to restring with the 8s. So there's the nice freshly cleaned up polished frets and fingerboard. Here go with the 8s. So we're going to get these on, we're going to stretch them out, and then basically stabilize the tuning, and then set the tremolo, stabilize the tuning, check the intonation, and then set the tremolo slightly down only, forward only, I guess. So to give a little bit of the old Shadows style tremolo shimmer if you need it, but nothing that affects the tuning or nothing that affects the action. So one of the things I found over the years is if you have a floating tremolo on a Strat, the act of floating it tends to lift the playing action up by about 0.5 millimeter, and if you lift the action up by about 0.5 millimeter in floating it, and then you try to adjust the saddles to bring the action back down again to where you originally wanted it, excuse me, then what happens is you take the force off the tremolo, and the tuning goes, and the tremolo sits back down, and so on. It goes all over the place. So you really have to figure it out in front, and if you're going to float it, you have to think ahead by setting your action unusually low, ready for it to rise. Anyway, what I'm just going to do now is I shall show you the stringing I use. When advice is, Richard, when you have an adjustable nut like this, start off stringing the D and the G first. So I'm starting with the D, I pull the string all the way through, and then I pull back 1 fret's worth, and then wind it on, and I hold the tight string so it goes over the loose string on the first trip round, and then as it comes round I press it down, pull up the loose string, so that the held tight string goes under the loose string the second time round, and that gives it as much grip as it needs to have for keeping good tuning, but doesn't store up a ton of extra string on the post. So been doing it that way for quite some time, and it seems to work very well. Okay, so the G next, all the way through, make sure the ball is right up inside the block, so pull back 1 fret's worth, wind it on, hold it tight, pull, steer the held one over the loose one, as it comes round push it down, and let the loose one go over the top of the, the loose one go over the top of the held one until it tightens up. So that will keep the nut in place so it won't zip off and ping off and can come out and disappear around the room if you're not careful. Okay, back a fret, go. So no tyings required, no knots. That only ends up with a struggle to undo the strings, so it doesn't really, whoops, that got stuck, you see, so pull that through. yeah, any knots and loops and knots and tyings and stuff just makes the whole thing really difficult. I've done something wrong here. That's gone far too far through. I'm doing too much. Pull back one fret. It's just, come on. Okay, the A and the E. Whew. God, it's so hot in this workshop on these summer days. Not kidding ya. Feel the heat. I mean, it's a really. I'm not complaining because the same thing that makes this boiling in the winter makes it warmer than it by rights should be. So it's very well insulated, but as you can tell, it keeps the heat in. Something rotten. Okie dokie. Cut the last of the excesses off, put them out of the way in the bin. Whew. Now I'm going to be a little bit careful when it comes to the stretching strings business right now, because first of all, I'm using 8 gauge strings, so they are very, at the top end, they are very delicate. Now I'm just looking at this alignment first of all. Yeah, that's actually okay. Make sure it's a tiny bit more room on the treble side, but that's what you want, if anything. So I'm not going to worry about that. So the first thing I'm going to do is zoom out, something like that. Just going to stretch out the strings first of all, get them bedded in, which does take quite a lot of, or produces a lot of slack all of a sudden. But I'm going to be careful around about top string. I've got some 8s, but they are unknown quality. They're sent to me as a present. So we're going to tune up. Okay, there's the first stretch and tune up. Now what I'm going to do is to stretch with thumb and forefinger up and down a good couple of times. There goes my phone for some reason. And what we'll get is more slack, and we'll tune it up again and then go back. And that's just what you need to do. And sometimes you need to do it 3, 4, 5 times. That's what I call sticking up pickup poles that stuck me in the thumb. Yeah, so you need to do this as long as it takes to stop it detuning any further when you stretch it. Now, like I say, on 8s I tend to back off a bit because I don't want to waste a set. Yeah, I don't want to waste a set by snapping the high E. So, more stretching. And then when you're confident that it's stopped leaching out the slack by detuning, because that's all that's happening, is it's just detuning because you're freeing up a bit more trapped slack. And it's, you know, I've said many times I can get people can bring me guitars that they've played for years and I can still pull a ton of slack out of them, and I can predict that that guitar wouldn't have been a very good stayer in tune guitar because of that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, because it's getting on and I am roasted and I need to stop and cool off, I'm not complaining, it's going to be like this for a couple more days maximum, and then we're down to normal, back to autumn weather, I think. Oh well. But yeah, for these couple of hot days, it's really unpleasant up here. It's too much. So I'm just going to quickly check the intonation so that we can be done and dusted. That's a pretty good intonation, very good. Let's just check the action here. So it's a little bit low, so let's get this up to its correct height. Fly a kite to the highest height. No point doing these too low just for the hell of it, because you just end up with buzzes that you don't need. So 1.5, 1.25. Whoop. No. Wow. Come along. Okay. Okay. Now the one thing I don't have is the tremolo that this normally has. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if one of these temporarily fits, which I don't think it does. So maybe I'll just use a plain bar and just see if I can make an adjustment to the trem claw screws so that this slacks off until the point where it will be easy to press down with the slightest amount of force. So we don't want all of this claw force or spring force on the back right now. I just put that in to begin with to make sure it stayed flat to the deck. Now this is got 8 gauge strings on. They're still sitting there nicely. In a way, you can really just go until this starts to lift off the back and then just come back in a little bit. So when you see the plate rising up at the back slightly under the strength of the string pull alone, you'll know that you've reached the point where the springs are overpowering the pull of the strings, and at that point you can just go put a bit more string power on. Yeah, that's nice, that's very light. Good. Okay, happy with that. So final thing is we put the plate on the back. That's got a load of weird scratches on it. Oh well. Plate on the back. It's got black screws. And then do all of these up and we'll be ready to put this in the bag and take home. There we go. So that's the setup. As it happens, Richard will be able to see that most, if not all, of the fret wear on the lower frets is gone. And that was sort of a combination of the fret leveling and the the fret leveling and the polishing out. So you'd struggle to actually see any damage on there now, so it's pretty much cleared up. So I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out. Just the tiniest bit of push on the tremolo. Yep, just the littlest of action, force on the tremolo arm to make it work. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. The Made in Mexico Strat, ready to go in the bag and take home. Much better. I'm glad I didn't shim it in the end. It's got these little grub screws are actually at their sort of full extent at the moment, which is, yeah, you know, it's neither here nor there. It's fine, it's working. It just means there's nothing to catch the hands here, so palm muting is much more comfortable. But of course, those are the originals. They can go back in if needs be. And also, along with this, goes this, which I often strangely forget, or I seem to be regularly forgetting to attach to the guitar when done. So here it is. Actually, I will do it this way. Put that in there, do it up, and then we'll attach the whole thing to the scratch plate, like so. Right, there we go. Thank you for watching. See you again very soon. Probably another Fender.